Good evening. I'm going to be the bearer of bad news and ask everyone who's having amazing conversations to find your seat so that we can partake in another amazing conversation. Sound good? All right. So, good evening, and thank you for sharing space with us here at the Foundation for a Healthy St. Petersburg Center for Health Equity. My name is Marcus Allen Brooks, and I serve as the Chief Impact Officer here at the Foundation. As we come together in the spirit of health, equity, and justice, we pause to honor and acknowledge the original custodians of this land. We recognize that the area known as St. Petersburg, Florida, is the ancestral homeland of the Tocobaga, Miccosukee, Seminole, and other indigenous nations who lived, thrived, and cared for this land for generations before colonization. We honor their elders, past, present, and emerging, and to all indigenous people who continue to steward this region and uphold their cultural traditions despite centuries of displacement and erasure. Prior to our activation of this physical space and the many other entities that called this space home, it served as a segregated grocery store that Black members of this community could not utilize. With the utmost intention, we've rewritten its purpose and have begun to imagine all of the impactful learnings, connections, and solutions that these four walls can hold in an effort to create a thriving community for all. This acknowledgement is just one step in our ongoing commitment to equity, truth, and quality community health. May it serve as a reminder of our shared responsibility to honor our collective humanity and carry this awareness into the work we do moving forward. I'd like to now invite Tampa Bay Times Chairman and CEO Kannan Galati to the stage to welcome everyone this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Marcus. Actually, Marcus, don't go anywhere, because I just found something out right before we came up here. Not only is Marcus and the foundation so kind to open up this venue to us, Marcus is also sharing his birthday with us tonight. So let's give him a big round of applause. A wonderful birthday with 400 of your closest friends, Marcus. You can't ask for more than that. But thank you for the warm introduction. As Marcus mentioned, my name is Kannan Galati, and as the head of the Times Publishing Company, I can just say how honored I am to share this evening with you, and so happy that you came out to join us for this very important conversation. Tonight, we're going to hear from a number of experts, people who understand what placemaking is like in cities that do it well, longtime residents of St. Pete, environmentalists, developers, local leaders. And we're here to gain a new perspective for the possibilities of what could happen on the 86 acres in downtown St. Petersburg. Spotlight Tampa Bay began 2 years ago with a very clear and simple mission: to raise the level of debate on the most important topics facing our region. We do this by convening experts and members of the community to come together for an enlightened conversation. Spotlight Tampa Bay blends the storytelling of great journalism with the trust and integrity of the Times. If you walk away from tonight's discussion having learned something new, having gained a new appreciation for a different viewpoint, then we have done our job. And I appreciate you being here and joining us in that spirit. And there are few issues that have raised as much debate as the one we're going to talk about tonight: what to do with the 86 acres that's currently home to the topless Tropicana field. Now that the deal between the Rays and the city of St. Petersburg and Pinellas County has fallen through, we're at a crossroads, but we can see it as a new opportunity, a once-in-a-generation chance to dream up something big, something that will affect the residents of this city and this region for decades to come. The Times is very proud to partner with the Foundation for a Healthy St. Petersburg to bring you the Healthy Community Series from Spotlight Tampa Bay, an ongoing conversation that explores what it truly means to belong and what it takes to build a healthier, stronger community for all. The Foundation for a Healthy St. Petersburg leads, funds, partners, and advocates to create a community in which good health allows for all people to thrive. The Foundation's president and CEO is Dr. Kanika Tomlin, a former healthcare executive, and two-term deputy mayor for our fair city, and now she leads the foundation that brings us together tonight here in this venue. So before Dr. Tomlin comes up, let's watch a short video about the great work the foundation does.
At the foundation, we know that optimal health outcomes and well-being should be an attainable reality for all of us, regardless of our race, regardless of our ethnicity, our gender, geography, or income. We also know that all too often this just is not the case. So we are working to advance racially equitable health outcomes in our community by improving the systems and conditions that shape them. We do this work through 4 primary pathways. We lead, fund, partner, and advocate. We are working to create equitable opportunities for all of us. This is the data. This is the truth. This is our work. No one can do this work alone. It takes a full ecosystem of support, and we are all a part of that ecosystem. Now that we know better, it's time for us to do better. So let's do so together. Good evening. Thank you. Thank you. We are so excited to have you here with us. Thank you for joining us to lean in and learn more about possibilities and new perspectives for our city's 86 most contemplated acres. It is really so exciting for our foundation team to be here with you for this. As was said, I'm Dr. Kanika Tomlin. I'm the president and CEO of this foundation, and our work here in the Center for Health Equity is one of many ways that we activate philanthropy to create a community where good health allows all people to thrive. We welcome you to the work, and this work is exactly what we do here. We convene our neighbors, national thought leaders, subject matter experts, and fellow change agents in this inclusive, welcoming space so that we may listen, learn, connect, and create ideas that advance equity, health equity, specifically the racially equitable health outcomes that are required for our city to meet the fullness of its potential. And our work here in the center is only one way that we invest in that change. Since inception, we've granted more than $31 million to improve the systems and conditions that shape our community's health. We also offer capacity building, education, thought partnership, data, research, enlightening experiences such as this one, and so much more. Our focus is on race and the role that race plays in the conditions that determine our health because data points us in exactly that direction. Our most recent health equity profile, published just last year, shows that the racial disparities that remain pervasive throughout society result in a shocking reality for us here at home. People of color in South St. Pete are less likely to thrive than our white neighbors. We are more likely to experience life-altering chronic diseases, to be exposed to injury and violence, and to suffer the risk of early death. And this is unacceptable. Without any just cause, nothing about it is fair or right, and everything about it can be changed. So together with our community, we work to change it every day. It's what we've gathered to do tonight. We are very proud to partner with the Tampa Bay Times to produce this Spotlight series that examines what it means to be a healthy community. We're excited and grateful to start with a look at these parcels of promise, 86 acres, that await our community's imagination on how they will catapult this whole city along the margin of excellence from a great to an iconic place, a place that sets the standard for quality of life in America. That's what's before us. We can do that with this site. We can set a new standard in this country for community-centered redevelopment. Our business, arts, and public sector leaders can go from benchmarking to being benchmarked with the right strategic development of this site. It's up to us. It's up to the scope of our dreams as our community looks to make life better for everyone who calls St. Pete home. We must inform our dreams with expert insight, community-centered dialogue, tested best practices, and an empowered citizenry that is clear about all that is at stake. The page is turning, and it's time, community, to dream. But our dreams must be informed. Our bright ideas must be based in the requisite principles and values that define who we are as a city. This is about more than the redevelopment of a site, as you know. That's why you're here. It's an opportunity to be record-setting in our approach, comprehensive in our contemplation, and absolute in our insistence about who it should serve and how that will unfold. Everything from the selection of a developer to procurement processes, from housing options, making sure they're affordable, to the creation of career ladders, from culture incubators to educational opportunities to innovative entrepreneurial paradigms that boost our whole city's economy, present an opportunity to get it right with and for the people it will serve. And all of this touches our health, all of it. These are the decisions that form the determinants that cure the societal ills that shape our health. And our health shapes our lives. So tonight, let's start again. Let's start again with our dreams, but let's make sure those dreams meet the magnitude of this moment. Let's insist that they be backed by expertise, that they scale the leading edge of placemaking, and perhaps most importantly, that they serve our city's soul in a way that reflects, addresses, and acknowledges the history of that site and the people who once called it home. And let it do that in a way that builds an equitable, stronger, more inclusive future for all who will follow. Tonight, our panelists will guide our thinking on all of this. Tonight, we will learn, we will listen, we'll ask questions, we will dream. And our hopes for a community where good health allows all people to thrive will be that much more a reality. Thank you for answering the call to dream. We hope to see you again with us in our center soon for more of this good work. And now I'd like to introduce tonight's moderator, Colleen Wright. Colleen is the St. Petersburg reporter for the Tampa Bay Times. After graduating from the University of Florida, she covered education in Pinellas County for the Times from 2015 to 2018. She then covered education at the Miami Herald. She has now covered St. Petersburg's government and its people for the past 4 years and is proud to have spent her career working at Florida's very best newspapers. Colleen, I'll hand it over to you.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Tomlin. How's everyone feeling tonight? Is everyone excited? I've been covering this topic for 4 years, so I'm excited to nerd out with everyone. We've got a great panel here tonight, and I'm excited to hear your questions too, so thank you all for coming out tonight. Before we get started, let me walk through how tonight's gonna go. The panel will go until 7:30 tonight, and we'll leave the last half hour for audience questions. Volunteers will be going around collecting your written questions on cards, so we ask that you please pass them to the outside of your rows. We'll try to get to as many questions as we can. This event is being recorded and is being broadcast live. A link to a video of tonight's event will be emailed to all registered participants afterward. Sound good? Okay. All right, so let's introduce the panelists. To my left is Dr. Elizabeth Strom. Dr. Strom is an associate professor at the University of South Florida. She is an expert on urban development, the role of arts and tourism in cities, and affordable housing. Dr. Strom. Okay, next we have Peter Kageyama. Peter is a 30-year resident of St. Petersburg and the best-selling author of 4 nonfiction books on cities and placemaking, including For the Love of Cities, which was recognized as a top 10 book in urban planning and development. Also joining us tonight is Erica Hall, who sits on the board of directors for the National Sierra Club. Erica is a community organizer, environmental justice advocate, senior legal professional, and a justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion facilitator, trainer, and consultant. Next, we have Jillian Bandies, an executive board member at Urban Land Institute Tampa Bay and the president and co-owner of Bandies Construction Company. She is a certified general contractor and has worked across both commercial and residential development in both for-profit and nonprofit contexts. All right, and last but certainly not least, I'd like to introduce Moselle Davis. Ms. Davis is a longtime educator, community member, and proud native of St. Petersburg. She enjoyed a 38-year career with Pinellas County Schools, and her late husband, Verl Davis, was the first black principal of St. Petersburg High School. One more thing about Ms. Davis. She made sure to let me know that with the exception of going away to college, she has spent all of her 92 years in South St. Petersburg. So we have, institutional knowledge is in the house. Okay. All right. Well, thank you all for joining me tonight. You ready? Okay. So first question, and I'm going to start with Dr. Strom, and we'll go down the row, and we'll go from there. Okay. So easiest question tonight, probably. If it was up to you, what would you do with the Tropicana Field site, and why?
Yes.
Dream big.
Very easy question. So there's so much land available for development that I think it would be a mistake to say I want this one thing. I'd like to see the community sort of re-stitched together, or to have the street grid reintroduced to that area. And then I'd like to see it developed with a neighborhood idea so that there's different segments. Instead of trying to say 86 acres and it's all going to be like this, we want to have different areas, maybe some more low-rise, some denser, some more commercial, some more family-oriented. So that would just be off the top of my head what I would go with.
I agree from a structural standpoint. I would say philosophically, I'd like to see there's enough there. The old adage says everybody eats. That there should be room for local entrepreneurs, local developers, statewide entrepreneurs and developers, national developers as well. And I'd like to see it sort of go up and down that range. And again, I think there is the project is so big that literally everybody should eat.
Good evening, everyone. Can you all hear me okay? Thank you for having me. For me, from a sustainability standpoint, an environmental standpoint, I like to see us focus on resiliency, including net zero energy use, solar-ready construction, and microgrids for emergency response. Whatever we build there, it needs to be able to withstand a Cat 5 hurricane. It needs to be a combination of things, a community hub, a resiliency hub. It should be inclusive. It should have green space. It should have things that mean something to each one of us. So I think it's an opportunity, as we heard, for this to be a reconfiguration of our legacy. And the question I will pose to you all now, and I'll come back to it, when we look at this, what is our legacy and what do we want our legacy to be? I'm deeply rooted in legacy planning right now as a Black woman in the space. So as I look at my legacy 7 generations from now, I pose the question to all of you, what does your legacy look like?
Good evening. I'm going to divide my response to this question into 2 parts. The first part is what I want to happen. The second part is what I think has to happen. What I want to happen is more baseball. I was 13 years old when I went to the Rays opening day with a friend and my parents. My mom is here in the audience tonight. And so it's not a reach to say that baseball is part of my culture. It is part of our environment here in St. Petersburg and throughout Pinellas County, and it is hard to see them go. But moving to the second response, I understand that may have to happen, and we may have to engage with other stakeholders and pursue other priorities. And I accept that because the negotiations and the history of the site would lend itself towards a different, more creative solution. I agree with what Peter said in terms of diversifying the facilities there, and I agree with the idea of having it be resilient. I think there's a long way to go to figure out what that mix actually consists of. but I do accept that it has to change.
Well, I might begin by saying I wanted to say that. But I do think I would like to begin with baseball because I think there's a simpatico between St. Pete and baseball. It fits. I say that from the standpoint that I went to the preseason games. To what do you call them?
Spring training.
Okay. I went to those games, and I remember the day that my mother let me drive the car, and I saw Larry Doby, who was here for spring training, and he waved. I remember that all these years. So I think there's something about that's very special about baseball. My 90-year-old my friend's 90-year-old mother was selected by the Times and the Rays to, and they went to her home, had her picked up by a limousine and taken to the game because she was a Rays fan. Now that was maybe, no, she was 98 when that happened, but she listened to the Rays game on radio. That's how committed she was. Those are just examples of how important I think it is. I think it needs to happen. I know that there are several financial issues that are probably I'm not as astute on, but I'm sure those who make those decisions, own those decisions, I pray will make the right ones, and it'll all happen. So that St. Petersburg is a city that is family, that welcomes families. I think that's important.
Amen.
Thank you.
All right. So that was, right, just kind of a big dream of, what you'd like to see on the Tropicana Field site. But I think what's also important to ask is what shouldn't be on that site, or what that site should not become. What shouldn't it be? What should the city stay away from, developers stay away from? Ms. Davis, I'm going to go back to you, and we're going to come this way. So what shouldn't it be?
Lots of concrete, tall buildings, no parks, no sidewalks, nothing that welcomes, things that don't welcome walkers. In my neighborhood now, I see folk who don't necessarily look like me walking their dogs, pushing their strollers. And I know that they are doing that because they live in my community. And that's nice. My daughter told me not to use the word nice, but anyway.
So nothing that doesn't welcome others.
I think the look downtown is fine for downtown, but that's not what we need all over the city.
Jillian?
Well, Moselle, you and I can take a trip across the bridge together and go to a game at Steinbrenner this year, I think.
Yes.
That's in line. What should not be there? Brickell City Center should not be there. I would disagree. There's room for a few tall buildings, just a few. We want to make sure that we have enough density to ensure affordable housing. Part of my nonprofit advocacy is with YIMBY St. Pete. That stands for Yes in My Backyard. We advocate for affordability. Thank you. And without density, you simply can't get affordability. And so it's essential to get those tall buildings where people can live close to where they live, work, and play. That's a key component. But it can be done thoughtfully. It can be done with attention to detail, with enough public space, with enough set-asides for community land trusts or other subsidized developments. There are ways to make it happen that respect the community and respect the place.
For me, one thing that shouldn't be there is big box grocery stores. I think we have to invest in our local community, like One Community Grocery Co-op and community-led organizations that want to build in South St. Pete. So I would not want to see, even though we know grocery stores are economic anchors, but to have a community-led, community-based cooperative that allows the community to be owners as well as members while building economic power. I would rather see that than to see big grocery stores come in and not invest back into the community or into community economic development.
I would not like to see it be the Battery, which is the home of the Atlanta Braves, which was developed by a single developer, master plan, and it's state-of-the-art, no doubt, but it is all national brands, national chains, and it's almost like they said, well, there can be one Mexican restaurant in here, there can be one seafood restaurant, there can be one of this, one of that, and they're very selective about how it was, and it feels very antiseptic, and the response has been very meh to the whole overall thing. Along those lines, I would like to see something more authentic that is there, that is more us, that is a little bit more ground up. So good top down, interesting bottom up, meets in the middle. We should have something pretty cool.
So thanks for that, Peter. When the Raise Hines proposal was still alive, I heard people say, it'll be like the Battery. I'd be like, no. I mean, basically the Battery, I'm from Tampa, and so if you could imagine Wiregrass Mall in Wesley Chapel and plopping a baseball stadium there, that's the Battery. That's not what you want in the center of St. Pete. But the thing I'm gonna say that you don't want, in addition to not wanting to be the Battery, is you don't want a convention center. Please, anyone who's out there proposing a convention center, do not propose a convention center. A colleague of mine, Professor Savage, wrote a really good book called Convention Center Follies about how business interests and highly paid consultants convince cities they want to take all their public funds and build an enormous convention center, which is empty most of the time, and then they have to raise more money because the convention center always claims it's too small or too outdated. And we already have a convention center in the region. The people in Tampa, I don't know who had the idea of blocking half the waterfront with a Tampa Convention Center, but I hope they never get hired again. So you don't want that in St. Pete. If you want to bring in conventions, think about hotels that have space for smaller conventions. You don't want a convention center.
Okay. All right. So there was some kind of reference back to like the Raise Hines deal, which I was asked before maybe to just play a quick catch up. So the deal is dead. The city and the Rays are currently, legally, formally unwinding the deal, but it's over. And that's kind of it. And then Mayor Ken Welch wants to move forward with kind of Gas Plant 2.0, a new version of the gas plant, and I think this conversation maybe kind of sets the ground for that. So my next question there is, who should develop the gas plant? Should the city be the master developer? Should it bring in one developer? Should there be a mix? How do you go about that? How should it be executed? Yeah, we'll start with you.
So easy for me to answer because I have no idea. I think you definitely don't want everything to look the same. The question of whether you could have a master developer who then subcontracts out, it's a little bit more on the project management and construction side that I'm used to dealing with. So I'm going to pass to people who have more expertise.
I think the answer would probably be somewhere in the middle. I don't think the city has the requisite expertise on staff. And I also think that if you went to a master developer, you risk the Battery situation there where you have a single vision that is sort of executed down the line. I think somewhere in the middle where you have a plan that maybe is done by a master planner but is executed by a number of different entities, again, local, state, and nationally based developers that could reflect that interest and give us a sense of variety up and down the project.
Okay.
I agree. I also would like to see more community-based organizations involved in the planning, and maybe groups like the APA, USGBC, volunteers on that level that do a lot of that work, professionals from the built environment community, and architecture and transportation, it has to be a collective effort. You have to connect the disconnected fields and groups, whether that's public health professionals, transportation experts. Everyone plays a role. Everyone has a part. Whatever your expertise is, you should be bringing that to the table. There shouldn't be one entity making all the decisions for all of us. Collectively and cooperatively, we should all be making the decision.
So, before we get to you, Jillian, you're a contractor. Is that feasible? How could that work out?
You need a master developer. If you are going to pull off what could be a multi-billion-dollar development, you need somebody overseeing utility work, roadways, infrastructure, safety. I mean, there's the idea that you could come in and do it internally in the city or with community groups is difficult because just the sheer amount of capital required. I mean, these are people that are putting up hundreds of millions of dollars to just get things out of the ground and putting their capital at risk at a project that is highly risky, that requires significant expertise, and frankly is a political football. So to mitigate all of those concerns, you have to have somebody with just a deep bench and deep pockets. And that's not to say that you couldn't have a significant component with community involvement or that local groups couldn't be a part of the conversation. And I think requirements should dictate in the RFP that that would be required. But putting all the pieces together on a property this large with this much at stake, you've got to have an expert.
If I could just add to that, we spent a long time building a community benefits agreement. A lot of people in this room put a lot of effort and energy into building an advisory council, one around the community benefits agreement and around the CRA, the 10th anniversary coming up, by the way. So again, it's an opportunity for us to revisit that as well as we look forward to the next steps. But there's a community benefits agreement already in place, although it may have been diluted and watered down from what it originally was meant to be so that this development could take place. But there are parameters, and what we need to do is revisit those and re-strengthen those again with the community input and the community support. Yes, we need what you're saying, but without the community benefits agreement, without guardrails to make sure that this time the community is a part of every step of this, it's not going to work.
Erica, I was not a part of the CBA when that got off the ground. I'm actually very curious how you think it could work better.
Whew, that's a loaded question, but for the people, I don't want to speak for others, but for the people that were a part of the negotiations and part of these advisory council and the discussion and the committee, it just needed one, more community participation and involvement, whether that's from the neighborhood associations that the development affects throughout that community, or community residents and members itself. It should have been a multi-disciplined advisory council, not just business people, not just developers, not just Chamber of Commerce, but it should have been more inclusive, in my opinion. So if we want to revisit that and truly make it a CBA, then it has to be a CBA, Community Benefits Agreement.
Go ahead, Bader.
But in order to get to any agreement, we have to be negotiating with somebody across the table. And one of the ways we might be able to do that is through an organization like ULI, which Jillian is part of. There's precedent for that. ULI does what's called a TAPS program, a Technical Assistance Program. They actually helped us create our Downtown Waterfront Master Plan years ago. So an outside entity like that could come in and provide some outside, a bit of distance, and an outside perspective. And of course, that part of that process is, of course, actually conversing with the locals and taking all that information into account. So there is precedent for bringing in someone outside to help us just at least get the RFP process started.
What do you think, Dr. Strom?
About the CBA? Or-
No, just about bringing in, you know, an outside process. Like, do you think there should be some kind of like outside counsel or
Well,
outside consultant?
I mean, I think you're definitely going to be bringing in, whether it's a master planner or consultants, and if you want to have people who have experience working with projects at this scale, you probably have to go outside of Tampa Bay. That's, but most of big projects, even the Raise Hines project, if you saw the list of people who were involved, I mean, there was a dozen or more that included affordable housing developers, local people, national people, international people, and so I think it's not an either or. You could have, you know, if indeed, and I trust our expert here on construction about whether you need a master developer, that makes a lot of sense to me, that you need someone good at project management, but there's no reason they can't outsource parts of that project, whether it's geographically parts of the project or sort of, you know, community input. You know, it's not realistic to have, nonprofits need to be involved in part of the development. It's not realistic to say to nonprofits, you know, there's a bunch of land here, so you go do your thing. They just don't have the capacity to do that. So it needs to fit into some kind of a structure that's provided by the city in cooperation with someone who's overseeing the whole project.
Thank you. So one of the big kind of deal breakers for a lot of people in the community was, in the Raise Hines deal, was the sale of 65 public acres of land. This time around, should that land remain public or be sold? City control, we'll start with you. Go ahead, Dr. John.
I mean, so, you know, I mean, in my fantasy world, it becomes a huge, you know, community land trust, and then all the profits then sort of get put back into the city. But my fantasy life is not what's going to happen here. And so I don't really see how you would have the city retain control over all that land because of all the things that need to happen on it. They may retain control until something is completed, but I think it could be tricky for the city to remain the owner of the land. There also then you'd need to have a lot of different you know, arrangements for developers and property owners taking responsibility for what happens there, so the city doesn't constantly have responsibility for rebuilding things. So I think that if I were the city, I would not want to hold on to all the land. I would want to keep parts of it for parks, for infrastructure, but I think if someone's going to build a hotel, they should own the land the hotel goes on.
One of the proposals that has been out there that was floated by former Mayor Rick Baker just recently, this idea of the St. Pete Commons, of a large Boston Commons type park, 30 some acres on that. I think that would be that's the kind of land the city should be retaining. And again, parceling out, because the sale of that land funds everything else that we want to do within that. But retaining a sizable portion of it, especially the parks, because parks are in our DNA, you know, and the one knock on our parks, according to the Trust for Public Land, who was just here giving us the latest park score, we have outstanding parks. We are the 14th best of the 100 largest cities. The one thing that they knocked us on was acreage. We don't have enough parks by their metrics, so something like this would be an amazing addition to an already fantastic park system.
Okay, all right.
For me, and I may be a dreamer, but I see it as a possible collaboration, public-private partnership, exploring municipal bonds, exploring other ways for partnerships, both nonprofit development as well as for-profit partnerships. Again, it's an opportunity to think outside the box and not be locked in. It's an opportunity to create innovative, creative revenue streams and financing streams. So I would implore that we look at multiple opportunities for collaboration.
Okay.
I agree with Peter and Erica. You can have it all. There's 86 acres. You could divvy it up 2/3 park and 1/3 development, or half park and half development, or some recipe that we all cook up, and you can make it work. There's so much money to be gained by the city, and there's so much value to be gained in terms of a public interest in a park or other amenities. This really is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity.
All right. Ms. Davis, what do you think? What's the community pulse on this?
It's interesting to me that we almost went with an idea. What was planned almost happened. So are we saying here now that that was not a good idea? Those were not there was not appropriate consideration put into it, or because it almost happened. So we need to look at, I think, what was inappropriate in that. Why did it really fail? And I'm not one for looking back, but we do need to take an introspective look back and see what happened, because it almost happened. And so I would say, as much as I know about this kind of thing, the whole idea is financially and all that beyond my contemplation, but if I think we could have it all, if it's appropriately planned and then executed. I think the city of St. Pete owns the decision. And I think they need to stand up to the responsibility for owning it.
Okay. Ms. Davis, do you think there's trust in the community for the city to do that, to step up and own it? Do you think the community has trust?
I don't know that.
Is there trust in the community? Or does the community have trust in, the city of St. Petersburg to do
I think
do
they
right?
do have, I think they could know more. People could know more. I think there's less clarity in the way decisions are made and why they're made and who's making them. I think if someone said that already, but I think if there's more involvement of total community, and in saying that, the dynamics of the community is totally different, has changed completely over the years.
Okay.
And so I think that needs to be considered also.
All right. Anyone agree or disagree on that point? Trust in the community?
It's hard to move forward after all the events that have transpired over the past 3 years, or I guess 4 years, Colleen, right?
Oh, really? If you're asking. Since 2007,
Sure.
right? Or even beyond that. Go ahead.
Sure. I mean, this has been on the table for so long. How do we move forward? The only way is another RFP process, a third RFP process, one that respects the community, as Erica has mentioned, and one that moves the ball forward in terms of getting something out of the ground. At a certain point, you have to just say it is better to do something and take a step forward than to just kind of continue to go in circles and be undecided. So I think speed is actually a priority in this. I'm not saying that we need to rush things. I'm not saying that we should, be too hasty about it. But, moving the ball, there's something to be said for the ability to actually get something done. And in the construction industry, it's kind of like proof of life. Start putting blocks on top of each other. Start moving dirt around on the site. Once you do that, once you have a product there and you're kind of seeing results, that's when you know something has been accomplished, not when you're continuing to debate and go back and forth. So get the RFP process out, do it equitably, get experts in the room to determine how to get the best response on that RFP, get the community in line quickly, and let's move on.
Trust has to be earned, and I think that is a process. The trust has been broken. There were promises made to families decades old that were broken, and the communities are still facing the repercussions of those decisions. So not to revisit the past, because I was told not to go back, but in order to move forward, you have to look back somewhat as far as what went wrong and what we could do to move forward. So I think in terms of the trust building, for me, Again, it starts with those communities that were most affected. And what we did and what we were asked to do as leaders in this community was host spaces for people to come and articulate their concerns, their issues, their questions, a safe place for people to come to learn, to your point, not to be judged because they didn't understand the X's and O's of the construction business and of the business environment, but we're in the people business. And for me, as a community movement organizer and leader in this space, the people part of it is the most valuable. So rebuilding the trust of decades of mistrust and broken promises is a process that needed to already start and needs to be fast-tracked and started again in order for this to move forward.
There's an outstanding documentary film that's been shown a couple times here. It's called Raised. It's about the history of the gas plant district. And one of the things that I didn't fully understand until I saw that was, again, the sense of history. But there was a gentleman at the screening that I saw, and then during the Q&A afterwards, he was asked what he wanted to see happen there. He said he just wanted us to be remembered. He said, but he felt that the hole was just too big. And that struck me because I've written about this concept of holes in the fabric of your community. Things that are broken and empty and hollow and just sit broken for long periods of time, they weigh communities down. There's a sense of dread. It's just bad for the community. It's bad for your soul, bad for your psyche. The thing is, many of us don't see the hole at Tropicana Field. But if you are of a certain generation in the African American community, you still see that hole. And I did not fully apprehend that until I saw this film. And I think Mayor Welch sees that hole in a way that many of us, we just don't. And I think we have to acknowledge that as part of that, and that what Erica was saying has to be part of the consideration.
Okay. All right. Well, and that's a perfect segue to the next question, which, of course, Tropicana Field, that used to be home to the gas plant community. They were promised, new housing, jobs, light industry, never came. And years later, it was raised and became home to a baseball stadium before the city even had a team. That came 10 years after that. Yes, it is a shame. And so how do we honor the gas plant? But also, it's such a source, right, of history and joy and a lot of pain as well. And of course, more recently, more graves were found under parking lots at Tropicana Field. So how does the city move forward, or any master developer, whoever redevelops this land, how do you honor the gas plant? How do you deal with graves and honor them? How do you move forward with that and yet pay homage to what was there?
Sure. Well, the issue of the graves, there are protocols that anthropologists and archaeologists used to how you handle when you come across a grave, how to exhume it respectfully. And so I think that's sort of a problem that is, we're not the first ones to face that, and that there are ways to deal with it as development goes forward. If you find graves, there are ways to handle that. As far as more widely respecting the community that was promised so much and received so little, I think there's both concrete things that we do and there's symbolic things that we do. So the concrete things is to honor the efforts that I thought were in the community benefits agreement, whether they would have come to fruition or not, to include training programs, to include hiring requirements, to include cultural and public facilities like the African American History Museum that really speak for, and of course, affordable housing woven throughout the project to provide homes that are affordable to people who maybe they themselves hadn't lived in the gas plant, but they could be descendants of people, or could have been people who had been displaced from there. So those are concrete things. But I also think that we say a lot with street names and with building names and with historical plaques. Maybe not everyone's like this, but I cannot pass up a historical plaque without reading it. And you learn a lot about what went on in the space you're standing in, such as the land acknowledgement we got at the beginning of this, which I thought was so moving. And so I think it's really on the level of both concrete benefits and symbolic recognition.
The point about names is incredibly important. In that documentary, there were a number of different sub-neighborhoods within the gas plant district that people said, oh, we were from this particular neighborhood. So I think figuring out a way to incorporate those into anything moving forward, and just simply said that anything is going to be better than a parking lot and an ugly stadium moving forward.
I agree with everything that was said. For me as an environmentalist, I would feel better having an assessment done, because if there's graves and things and bodies or what's there, I think we need to know what's there. And so an assessment may be appropriate. And then honoring the descendants and the families of the descendants that paved the way for that development and for those generations that followed decades later. But for me, again, I need an assessment. I need to know what is in that soil, what is there, what's toxic, what's not, and how do we move forward. I was in New York 9/11. I relocated, shortly thereafter. So being a part of that community, knowing what's there at the World Trade Center and not being able to move on until we knew what was underground. You really can't build in good faith and with a clean spirit and heart, knowing that you may have left things there that are not, one, healthy for the community and the environment, and does not respect the descendants of those communities.
I would want to echo everything that Erica and Liz have said. It's a damn shame what happened to our neighbors in our community, and it needs to be taken with the utmost seriousness. It can be done as part of a redevelopment plan, but it's a very big deal.
Okay. Ms. Davis, I think you're the only one up here who went to the gas plant and frequented the gas plant.
And
Raise
it
your mic.
represented, I think, the idea of the gas plant area is almost miscommunicated. That area was a section of, and the fringes around it, was a system of neighborhoods that came together and formed life for people who lived in those areas to deal with persisting life problems and to create a community for themselves. That was a city within a city. That's what it was. It was a city within a city. There was Fifth Avenue with the nice homes where the professionals lived, the doctors lived, the funeral home. It was anchored by some very nice, there I am saying nice again, very well constructed churches. There was, and then on 3rd Avenue, there were homeowners, just like on 5th Avenue, and businesses. And then 2nd Avenue was like probably the first strip mall that I knew about. And the businesses on 2nd Avenue were all African American owned. Hat shops, tea rooms. And
Ms. Davis has some fans.
And then in the, the musicians came to the Manhattan Casino, but on 2nd Avenue, there was an Elks Hall where the social clubs had their nice formal dances, and women had teas. There was Citizens Restaurant. There were all of those businesses were owned by African Americans, photographers. I worked my first year in St. Pete at Davis Elementary School. Across the street was Bethel Metropolitan Church. In fact, thank you, the Harlem Theater. But that area, like I said, was a city within a city, and African Americans had a life that had vitality in that city. Very very different from 22nd Avenue. I mean, from 22nd Street, which had a lot of very few businesses that were African American owned. They were owned by people who didn't look like me. And the drugstores, the supermarkets. Sidney Harden was not a food store. It was a service station. So it was to commemorate that area, you need to really know what we're remembering, and to do it properly.
All right. All right. So we're coming up on 7 p.m. and you all have a lot of questions. So I'm going to ask one more because I've saved it for last. But we started with baseball, right? This is all about baseball and beyond baseball. Mayor Ken Welch has pretty much sworn off negotiating with the Tampa Bay Rays ownership in its current form, the current owners. Is that, there was rumors of a sale, and is the team going to sell it? Right now, it's pretty quiet. Nobody can control that, right? Whether the team gets sold or not. So is that the right call that the mayor made to say, I'm no longer negotiating with this ownership group? Or should those doors kind of be reopened and negotiations be reopened to try to keep St. Petersburg a Major League Baseball city? What do you think, Ms. Davis? Okay, we'll come back to you. Jillian, you brought up baseball first. We'll come back to you, Ms. Davis.
Okay, I'll be the defender of baseball. I think Stu wants 1.7 for the team, right?
Roughly.
And
1.7 billion, to be clear.
Right, with a B.
Yeah.
Right. That's hard to find. It's also hard to find the capital needed to redevelop the site in a way that is effective and meaningful and respectful. I don't know if you should continue negotiating with them. I don't know the answer to that. I don't think that anyone who has been outside of the boardroom, I guess the war room you could call it, would really have the insight necessary to understand the dynamics of that relationship. But I can tell you as an outsider looking in, it seems to have gone on for an awful long time. And it seems to have cut the city out of meaningful leverage that I think is necessary when working with a big player with some big guns. And so I love the Rays. And I think they've been managed impressively. I mean, from a sports perspective, one of the most impressive teams in baseball. But from a business perspective, there leaves a lot to be desired. I hope we can start out on a new foot with somebody else, maybe, if somebody else buys the team. I guess it's possible that the negotiations could continue, but who knows? It's been so long.
Okay.
It's a no for me. I'ma play Simon Cowell when he says, I'm sorry, it's a no for me. I really don't think it's gonna make a difference in our lives one way or another. Like, it's really not going to feed me It's not going to put a roof over my head. It's not providing, unless it provides opportunity for the neighborhoods surrounding it and bringing economic development as well as equity and parity to those neighborhoods that have been disinvested for so long. For me personally, it wouldn't be a bad thing if we didn't rebuild that as a baseball team. Sorry. That may not be a popular opinion. Tampa Bay Times, don't come after me. I still read it. But for me, it's just not feasible at this time.
Quick correction, by the way, is Randy Jackson, who said, "It's a no from me, dog."
Okay.
But Simon Cowell did too,
Okay,
but
Simon took it.
it's all good.
You mentioned
Go ahead.
trust earlier. So clearly, there's nobody who knows the negotiation process deeper than Mayor Welch. If he says he doesn't trust the Rays anymore, then I think we have to say that there's something going on at the boardroom, and we probably have to understand that. And not for nothing, there is some cachet to being a community that says, you know what, to Major League Baseball, thanks, but no thanks. We're good. I mean, think about that. That says a lot about confidence in our city. Yeah. I mean, 25, 30 years ago, we were desperate for baseball. You know, and I think it says a lot about where our city has come and how far we have risen since then to say, you know what, we're good. And I do believe, baseball side, we will be absolutely fine.
Okay.
Peter, can I jump in? That may be the right choice. I don't actually know, but there's been a number of cities that have let a major sports team go and then come back
Yes.
to regret it. I mean, Atlanta, LA. I mean, there's a bunch of cities that have let NHL teams, NBA teams, let them go, and then
Yeah.
quickly thereafter they want to come back and get one back in their.
And you're the exception in the sense you were there opening day, and your formative years were with the team, and I totally get that. And I come from Northeast Ohio, and I remember I was there when the Browns left Cleveland, and that was a gut punch for that city. In a city that had taken so many punches, Rust Belt cities over and over and over again. But sadly, I mean, because the Rays have been here 30 years, although that seems like a long time, that is not generational history. That is not the Red Sox. That is not, you know, fathers and sons, the Yankees, you know, and passed down over and over again. I don't think we have the same sentimental attachment to this team that other places like a Cleveland or a Boston or a New York actually has.
So if I could say something, I think the mayor should be open to any proposal from anyone. Because, you know, the fact that trust was broken doesn't mean if the Rays come back and say, we're building a stadium, we just want the land, we're paying for the whole thing, $1.2 billion ourselves, why should the mayor say no, right? But I think that the opportunity costs for St. Petersburg in terms of money and land are very high. And so it's not clear to me that this is the best choice for the city. And I say that as someone who grew up with parents from Brooklyn who, whenever they mentioned the Dodgers and Ebbets Field, everyone cried. I am a huge Rays fan. I'm already thinking, what inning will it be in when I'm leaving here so I can listen to the game on the way home. And I should put in a plug, in addition to being a college professor, I am a baseball blogger at D-Rays Bay. So if you ever want to follow my recaps of the games, so when I say I don't think the area needs baseball, I am not speaking lightly. I will cry, I may move, but it's not worth $500 million for the city and the county to have a baseball stadium.
Ms. Davis.
I didn't mean to dodge the question altogether, but because I can understand the mayor's response. To get you to the bridge and then decide I can't help you across, or doesn't show any confidence in whatever the ideas were that got started, and I think is very disappointing, if not to the mayor, certainly to me. And I probably don't know how to talk at that high financial air level, but still in terms of negotiations and working with people and knowing, I think it was not nicely done, Celeste.
All right. Okay, first question from the audience, and it's a really good one. since this whole process will be redone, is planning to be redone, should it be put to a public vote? Should it be a referendum? Should the public have to weigh in, or should it just be left up to city council members? Does anyone feel very strongly about this? You go. All right, we'll keep to what we're doing.
The problem with a referendum is great for yes and no. But we're planning 86 acres. So what's the referendum going to be about? I mean, the referendum that was proposed when it was about giving money to the Rays to build a stadium, that's a yes or no. But if it's show us how we should reuse 86 acres, I don't know how you put that to a referendum.
Agreed. Far too complex. Leaders lead. And if we don't like where they lead, we vote them out of office.
Agreed.
Agreed, this is not a referendum item.
Ms. Davis, what do you? Yeah. Okay, so you don't want to vote on it. That's what elected officials are for. Yeah. Okay. Wow, we have a consensus. Okay. Here's a good one. Let's say there was a little bit of consensus here too. If the Rays don't stick around and they go, what would replace the stadium's presence as an anchor in downtown? We talk about this anchor tenant. That was kind of how the Rays Heinz deal was sold, right? The Rays would build a stadium and then the gas plant would be built around it, but the stadium was an anchor tenant. We had to have the Rays as an anchor tenant. So what would be the new anchor tenant? Go ahead, Peter.
I don't think we need one thing. It should be a lot of things. From a distance, a little fire, looks like a little fire, but you step far enough away, a lot of little fires look like a big fire there. So I think that lots of little things, medium-sized things. I think a hotel with significant convention meeting space would be amazing. We have a pretty good soccer team. I think there's hope that maybe we could do something interesting, with a soccer team, which would actually be a much smaller stadium footprint and a little less expensive there as well. But we don't need one thing.
Don't need one thing. Okay.
Agreed.
I like a park. I think a park is great.
One really good park, yeah.
I can't think of another anchor that really appeals to me beyond some massive green space with great bike trails and amenities and a playground for my kid. That's where the heart is. That's what our identity is. I think a park really embodies a lot of what we want to be. And Rick Baker, thank you for your editorial in the Tampa Bay Times last week. It really was illustrative in terms of what we need to do comprehensively to move forward on that front. I don't want a convention center, you're right. I'm not sure what the appeal is, a massive water park or, another sports team. It's hard to fathom, but green space is easy to rally around.
Green space, okay.
Let's
go to Ms. Davis real first and we'll come back to you.
I think I said earlier, I think something that attracts families, just groups of people, surely, young, old, newlyweds, that'll get us a designation as a great city to raise your children and things like that. I know there are idea people who know what those things are, and we can look at cities where they are and get ideas.
Yeah, so I just wanted to comment on the park. I love open space, and any redevelopment has to have it. The thing that concerns me about making the anchor a big park is that hopefully you all are going to take down I-175, and then voila, you've got a park, because Campbell Park is just on the other side of the highway. And so I think that whenever we think about the site, I think we should think about it in conjunction with that highway, what's going to happen with it, and then recognize that when we restitch St. Pete together, we're going to find that we have a park, and that we want to create open space with the understanding that we already have a park, and that we want to make that part of the system of open space we're going to have in that area.
I would love to see that happen, but I don't want to wait for the federal and state DOTs to make up their minds about something like that. We need to do something in the much more near term than that. It's a great long-term project, and if it does, great. We connect that park to the parks across the way, but I don't want to wait that long.
Peter, we can weigh in to our elected officials on the county level who are putting roadblocks in front of FDOT's and other activist efforts to bring I-75 down, because our local elected leaders are causing that to be dismembered, like the movement forward and the studies that are needed to eventually move on from that terrible highway. It is the direct result of local participation, county participation in the FDOT process that is not moving forward, and we do have a voice in that.
Okay. So this question from the audience member, I'm going to ask this question, but I'm going to then tack on my own question to it. This audience member writes, I have infrastructure concerns. Can the city require developers to pay for new water treatment and sewer services? But what I want to add on to that is after the hurricanes really showed that things are messed up, right? I mean, thousands of homes were flooded during Helene and Milton. It's a crisis. What do you can answer this question of like, can the city require developers to pay for, new sewer services? But also, what do you say to people who say the city should be focusing on getting people back in their homes and rebuilding and making these systems stronger so that this doesn't happen again? And we don't need this development. We should focus on that. And it's that the city doesn't have its priorities correct.
Cities require those things from developers all the time. So if you're selling the land or you have some kind of an RFP, those requirements go into that language. Also, if you want to be able to shore up infrastructure all around the city, selling some of that valuable land is going to give you the capital to do that. And then my final point is that when I looked at an evacuation map of St. Pete and an elevation map of St. Pete, and I got to tell you, if you're going to put people somewhere, it should be around Tropicana Field and not on the waterfront. And so I would rather see people living there and we put in the infrastructure to support them than continually building up in areas that are evacuation areas and then wondering why storms are so devastating for us.
The problem with our sewer system is not too many people flushing their toilets. The problem is at the facility level, they need to be shored up against storm surge. And most of the older infrastructure that is not in downtown is where you get the water intrusion during significant events. Developers have to put in new infrastructure. They have stormwater vaults that go into every major building that is downtown. In fact, downtown probably keeps a lot of the other areas from flooding because of the system that is already in place there. So yeah, and not for nothing, 7 of the 10 largest taxpaying entities in the city are downtown developments. If we're going to pay for the hardening and improving our sewer system, it's going to be downtown development that actually foots the bill.
I'd love to hear your perspective, Erica. Sustainability, resilience. What do we do?
I would like to see, one, those coastally vulnerable communities that the data done by Dr. Dixon and USF and ICAR, like Bartlett Park, Harbordale, Lake Maggiore Shores, Childs Park, all those 6 communities, and now we've added Shore Acres, and the data is showing that those areas are extremely prone to flooding and sea level rise. I would like to see us work with those communities to strengthen their infrastructure. So whatever that looks like, we need to pay close attention to that and work with the city. And as part of this stormwater management plan, we have so many plans here. The resiliency plan, stormwater management, the resiliency planning council has all of these things. Let's connect all of these structures that we continue to pour money in and resource vessels and vehicles that we continue to pour money in and really build something long-lasting and sustainable as part of this restructure.
Okay. Jillian, go ahead.
Resiliency can mean building up, above the floodplain with hardened construction methods, with things that can last for more than 20 or 30 years, which seems to be when most older homes croak when they were built after 1980. There's ways to do it that can be thoughtful. You can't kick people out of their existing homes in low-lying areas. That's just not a reality. And so how do you encourage those types of homeowners to build in a way that, or rebuild or harden in a way that is sort of long-term and financially feasible? It's a very difficult question. I have some ideas, but at the outset, you have to consider the people who are living there first, and then kind of what the development patterns are second.
Ms. Davis?
Those are the things, how we respond
to this need or the destruction from the storms. I think when we make the strong, positive response that I'm certain we're going to make, then that's going to be an attraction for people to bring their families here and to want to live, because we recognize the problem. I'm certain that those who have the ideas that you and others have mentioned, put them into force. It'll happen, because we're not going to be devastated, to remain devastated by what the storms created. We're going to overcome that.
Okay. All right. Well, development is years away, right? We were talking about how the process is lengthy. You need community input, you need plans, you need permits, and you need votes from elected officials. So how do you come up with a development that meets, the needs and kind of like rises to the occasion of that? It's going to be a development that's around for decades later. It'll take a decade, right, to kind of, the Reyes-Hines build-out plan was 30 years. Like 30 years, the clock starting last November, or whenever the bond votes got passed. So how do you do that? How do you plan for needs 40 years from now and put together development that looks like that?
So one of the rough things about being a planner, and I'm not a planner, but I teach planners, is that we are building for whoever's going to be here in 20 years. And so that's also one of the dilemmas in a project like this. We want to have community involvement, but we as community members speak to what we need today, and most of what's being built will not be here until it's ready for our children and our grandchildren. And so how you do that is rough. I mean, if we were doing this project in 2019, we'd probably want 1 million square feet of office space, right? And now that's sort of laughable. So I actually think that the fact that this is a 20 or 30-year project, and to your point about I-175, this project isn't going to be built in 10 years, Peter, so we have time. I think getting started with it makes sense, as some of you have mentioned, but I actually think it's a good thing. It's going to take decades, because otherwise we'd be making decisions now. We'd be turning dirt on every single site, trying to anticipate what people want 20 years from now when we just don't know. And so phasing this, because it will take a while, also means you have a chance to go back to the drawing board if something you had anticipated as being a real positive thing turns out not to be a positive thing. So I think the slowness is actually your friend, even though it doesn't feel that way.
I talk to city leadership all over the country, and this is not an uncommon question. Everyone is worried, it's like, so what should we be doing and how should we be thinking about this moving forward? The one thing I always tell the leadership as we sort of sit around the table, and I would say that to this audience as well, if we are making the decision for us, the collective us, and not thinking about our kids and our grandkids, then we're being selfish bastards, because we design for the future. And part of that means maybe laying off some of our own prejudices about things. The biggest one is probably about cars. I hear people worrying about parking all the time. Well, nobody loves a city because there's parking, right? I get that it is a pain in the butt, but especially if we're thinking about designing a city for the future, kids today, they don't love the car the way that we did. It's not looked at as freedom. It's a depreciating asset that they have to pay for and park. So if we're building around our collective notion about parking and what cars are and how important the car is, then again, I think we're being selfish bastards.
For me, I made notes. I said community needs assessment, participatory co-design. The structure should be co-designed. And then asset mapping, community asset mapping. Without knowing who your people are, the needs of the community, and assessing them, you won't be able to have a participatory co-design with the community as well as our elected officials and developers. And then asset mapping, what are our, kind of like doing a SWOT analysis, what are our strengths? There's a lot of expertise in this town, in this city, in our disciplines, in our communities. How do we map who's doing what and bring everyone to the table?
It is very difficult to plan for a 30-year prospectus. I think it's more, even, more of a reason to go towards a master developer who has that kind of longevity. It's just hard. I mean, there's no good way to slice it. I think what Peter said about not building around cars really appeals to me. We are becoming an increasingly walkable city, and promoting that through this development seems like absolutely the right move.
I certainly feel that the best way to prepare for the future is to do a good job of taking care of the now. So if we take our time and solve the problems that we've identified, correct our mistakes, look back, but don't stay back, move forward the way we're going, then whenever those years arrive, at least we'll know how to handle them.
All right. I have a lot of cards here about the gas. I have a lot of cards, period. But I have a lot of cards here about the gas plant and righting wrongs. To your point, Ms. Davis, do you think that righting the wrongs of the past, it can be done with this development, or that's just one of many ways to kind of atone for the past, or what else could be done, or is this development at Tropicana Field the way to do that? Or should there be more? Go ahead.
I think
All right.
maybe next time I'll have it all.
You got it.
I think that we certainly need to respect and accept and know what happened. If there are families that, and I've given a good bit of thought, that can remember and feel that those ills did occur, I think they should be talked to see what they would like to see happen. And then I think we need to do something. I think in particular, if the Woodson Museum is constructed as an excellent facility and it shows the correct history of St. Petersburg. I've seen the materials that have been written. A good bit have names are not there that I think should be there. And all of that somehow is archived and presented as a part of the history of St. Petersburg, because that's what it is. It's a history of the city. Then I think that that would be acceptable to those descendants. Their names, an example, like McCrae, who had a nursery. We hear about Happy Workers all the time, and not to take anything from Happy Workers, but there was a McCrae nursery on 12th Street North, 12th Street South, that was African American owned. And children in that area went to that nursery school. There's no mention of it in this day and time. So I think if a correct history is researched, and whomever the descendants are that are still here are contacted, and somehow that's represented in a lovely way at the Woodson Museum, it would be an answer to that question. I hope it wasn't.
Anyone want to add to that? Okay. All right. Okay. To your point about, consulting descendants of the gas plant and what they want to see, do you think reparations should be in the conversation, or should they have special consideration when it comes to this development?
I don't know.
Microphone.
There
you go.
Next time. I don't like the special consideration. They should just be a part of, included, because it's the right thing to do, and not have it being made as if it's a part of the history of the city. Reported accurately and, presented the way things are presented in the historical museums and other museums of the city. I think that would be acceptable to me. And I believe if we were to talk to the descendants of those people, it would be acceptable to them.
All right. Anyone else want to weigh in on the topic of reparations or direct consideration? I don't know, is this seen elsewhere in the United States where, you have land stolen and something has to be given directly to the people it was taken from?
It's got to be part of the conversation. It's an acknowledgement of the history. It's an acknowledgement of the wrong. Whether or not you can ever fully repair that is sort of the key question. I'm actually the son of a Japanese-American man who did receive reparations from Ronald Reagan at the end of his presidency. The Japanese-Americans who were interned all got about I think it was a $20,000 check there. And it wasn't that it was the money. I think for my dad, it was the acknowledgement that something, that the history, and that something was done to them, and somebody said, it was a way of saying, I'm sorry. So if there's a way to constructively say, I'm sorry, then we absolutely should figure out a way to do that.
Do we feel like this past Raise Hines plan did that with, you mentioned the Woodson African American Museum of Florida and plans for that, the job opportunities and the workforce training. Did it do that, or could more be included next time around?
For me, I think more could have been included. Again, I'm going to go back to the community benefits agreement and the intentional work that went into that to make sure that the community surrounding the TROP and that the deal included those communities on multiple levels, not just workforce development, but as a part of any advisory councils, a business improvement district, maybe creating a chamber of commerce like we have the MLK Business District in 49th Street, like really being very intentional about creating these places for hubs of entrepreneurship, for creation, for development, and to your point, I totally agree with that. So yeah, that's what I would say.
I would just add one very concrete thing in the CBA. So the Rays said we will contribute $10 million to the Woodson Museum, but it didn't specify when. If we're going to do this again, and it looks like we are, if we're going to have somebody like that, it's like, the $10 million is when we sign the agreement, that's going to go into the funding, because we all know that when it comes to fundraising, early money leads to fundraising success. As opposed to like, well, if you don't raise your $20 million for the museum, then they're off the hook. No, so let's make whoever we do end up partnering with, let's make sure that the check is written day one.
What else could be done better this time, just to round this out, just to make sure that we're getting off on the right foot this time around? You don't get a lot of shots at do-overs, but we have one now. So if you could do over one thing, what should it be with this deal?
So I was a little disappointed with the amount of affordable housing in the deal. There was a higher number, but a lot of it was off-site. And I think the whole point is to have our communities economically and racially integrated. And so sure, it's great to generate money and then find a cheaper site somewhere else and put up an affordable housing development there, but I think the point is to have it really everyone gets to enjoy the amenities of this new community. I understand that there are trade-offs and there are tensions, because if we also want to generate revenue from selling the land, we can't generate maximum revenue and at the same time tell developers you have to build for people at 60% of AMI. And so those are the trade-offs that the city will need to determine to what extent this is a revenue-generating project and to what extent it is an inclusive project.
I would chime in that public procurement matters. I do a lot of work in the public sector, and the way that municipalities engage with vendors, developers, material suppliers, these things have huge ramifications in terms of city budgets and successful outcomes with these projects. And so, I would note that only 2 respondents were in place during the last round of the RFP solicitations. And it is an underrated effort to get that right. So careful attention to how this is structured. You think about development as kind of maybe like a Christmas tree. You have to have a tree in place installed properly before you can decorate it. You have to have the nuts and bolts of a redevelopment plan before you can have other sort of wish list items put into place and funded properly. So we have a lot of work to do to get this right over the next decade or so, and trying to get the framework down right, whether it's this administration or another administration, is really essential.
I agree with all that is said. For me, again, I'm going to go back to the environmental resiliency piece. I'm stuck there. I'm 10 toes down on resiliency and sustainability, net zero energy use, solar-ready construction, and microgrid for emergency response. As part of our negotiation with the city, when we discussed, we advocated for a facility built to withstand a Cat 5 hurricane that could serve as an asset for local evacuations and disaster preparedness. We urge decision makers to require on-site electricity generation available during a grid outage and to move closer to achieving the goals adopted in the city's integrated sustainability action plan. Also, green infrastructure, Booker Creek restoration, native tree canopy expansion that is aligned with 30% tree canopy goals, native plants and sustainable landscaping, and open public green space with walkable and accessible trails. And I'm gonna stop right there. But for people that know me, it's always about the environment. It's always about sustainability and our green space, because that allows us to live and breathe. Without those things, we're killing ourselves.
You're right, do-overs are rare. In the 13th century, Japan was saved from the Mongol invasion by a typhoon that destroyed the invading fleet. The Japanese called that kamikaze, which means divine wind. Most of us know the kamikaze from World War II, the suicide planes. But the idea of the divine wind, I think, is interesting, because I think maybe years from now, we might look back at Hurricane Milton as the divine wind that saved St. Petersburg and allowed us to have this conversation in a new and a different way. With all of the mistakes that we made along the way, it's like, okay, how do we be better at this? And the fact that we're having a conversation like this really so early, the deal isn't even officially dead, but we're already starting to have this conversation. And I think that bodes very well for the city sort of moving forward.
All right. Well, that's a good place to end it. Give a hand to our panelists. They were awesome. Thank you all for sharing your expertise for us tonight. Special thanks to our sponsor, the Foundation for a Healthy St. Petersburg. All right. And as a reminder, this event was recorded, and a link will be emailed out to all registered participants afterward. We'll also share a brief survey to gather your feedback and let you know how to stay informed about future events. So thank you all so much for coming and sharing tonight with us. Get home safe.